This episode contains discussion of domestic abuse, talks of suicide, and gun violence. Listener discretion is advised.
Michelle O'Connell's death in 2010 is shrouded in mystery to this day. She was found dead from a gunshot wound, and her death was initially ruled a suicide. Over time, though, questions arose due to her troubled relationship with her boyfriend Jeremy Banks, who was also a sheriff's deputy in St. Augustine, Florida. Despite evidence suggesting foul play, the case was closed, leaving her family frustrated and seeking justice. The case gained national attention as it raised concerns about law enforcement bias and the handling of domestic violence cases. Michelle's family continues to fight for a proper investigation, hoping to uncover the truth.
All right, and we do have a couple thank yous. Thank you to Emmy for requesting this case.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to Mark for writing it up.
Thank you. I have this one piece of hair that is doing its very own. It's living its best own little life, and I don't. Where do you go? Where do you belong? We don't know. Okay.
It's that's none of your business.
Apparently it's not. All right, so let us just what do you think? Jump right into it or what?
Oh my God, I think we totally should launch right into it.
Okay, let's do it. So some of our Patreon supporters might hear this case and think that they've heard it before and recently at that. And that's because it bears a striking resemblance to a case that we covered as a mixtape that was released on April 17th, 2024. And it's crazy how similar these cases were. And Jessica did survive. Spoiler alert if you haven't listened to it, but it's out, right? But in this case, unfortunately, Michelle was not so lucky. So let's talk about Michelle O'Connell. I tried to make her Irish for just a second. O'Connell, she was a mother, daughter, sister, friend, caretaker, and lots of different things to lots of different people. She was the youngest of 6 siblings, and she was the baby of the family. All of her older brothers and sisters always looked out for her, they said. And one of her sisters remembers Michelle as an amazing athlete, and she really loved to swim. She was able to climb a tree faster than anyone else growing up. And I also think as the baby of the family, you're struggling so much to keep up, So you're you develop those things to do what the big kids are doing too.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
She was very fun loving. She was outgoing, and her family said she just embraced life and everything that came with it. She was a single mom, and that's difficult, but obviously she loved being a mother to her daughter, Alexis. She almost always worked 2 jobs, sometimes even 3, just to take care of her and Alexis. And Alexis was one of her main focuses, and probably her main focus, and then everything else, kind of came after that. But she always wanted to be sure that Alexis was taken care of, and she even went to the point of one time she went skydiving, just for fun. But she wrote a letter to Alexis just in case something happened to her, just so that she would know how much she was loved, and it's just
that she wanted her to be taken care of. Yeah.
Yeah. So Michelle worked part-time at a daycare, and in the weeks before she died, she had been promoted. So she finally had gotten to that full-time status at this daycare, and for her, this was a career. She wasn't working at a daycare as a stepping stone. This is what she wanted as her career. And so she becomes a full-time employee. She gets a key to the building. That was a huge ordeal for her. She was really honored. She felt really privileged to be able to have a key to the building, be trusted with that much responsibility. For her, this was her dream job, and she'd landed it finally. She finally got that full-time status. And her boss said that the day that, they gave her the key and the promotion was going into effect or whatever, that Michelle was I'm going to the doctor today. And she's and no, I'm not sick, but I finally have insurance, so I get to go. She's just to me, this says things are falling into place for Michelle.
Yeah, she's moving up in her mind, or you know what I mean? She's getting things that she's always wanted. It's
not like she just lost her job.
Right.
Just, keep that in mind.
Yeah.
All right. So in St. Augustine, the sheriff is a prestigious position, and the sheriff's office is one of the largest employers in the area. And Michelle had family who worked there, including her brother, Scott, and her mom, Patty, worked there as a file clerk. So they've definitely got connections to the sheriff's office, pretty close connections. David Shore was the sheriff of St. Johns County. for many years. I believe it was like 2004 to 2021. I mean, he's over a decade, okay? He had been elected 3 times, twice unopposed. He's very well connected in the area. Obviously, is the sheriff. Like, just keep that in mind.
I feel like that's totally not... It's not a good thing when somebody goes unopposed twice and gets the job. Like, you need somebody else to... If they're not doing their job correctly and that's the only option you have, that's not okay.
No, it's not. It was through her brother Scott that Michelle ended up meeting Jeremy Banks, and they meet about a year before she dies. And when they started dating, everything seemed great. A lot of people in Michelle's life thought she finally found someone she could rely on. Everybody was really happy that he was a deputy. That made them feel safe. That made them feel like Michelle would be safe. It made Michelle feel safe, like that she would be protected. After they dated for a little while, Michelle ends up moving in with Jeremy. So he, I believe he's an owner of a house. I don't know if he was renting it or not, but they move in. She moves into his house. And it's around that time that people started to see signs that things were not as they seemed. And that tracks and this is like, what, a few months in? That tracks exactly with how abusive relationships work.
Mm-hmm.
You get them in your home, or you live together, and that's when Michelle's family stops hearing from her as much. They don't see her nearly as much. The isolation component is there for everyone to see.
Yeah, he becomes a lot more controlling.
He's very controlling. He's very disrespectful. Patty, her mom, said that there was a time that they were over at Patty's house, and Jeremy, being a police officer, was like, oh, let me show you how I take down suspects or something like that. And Patty says, like, I watched it happen. He slammed her on the ground hard. He puts his knee in her chest. And there were times that, like, Michelle called her sister and said that he had done something to her and she was bleeding. And her sister is like, I'm calling an ambulance. And her sister says that Michelle's words to her were, no, please don't do that. That's going to make things harder for me. I don't want any trouble. That 100% tracks with domestic violence in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you report it, that's going to anger that person, right?
Well, and I know that there was a big issue with who's she going to report it to. He's a cop.
His friends?
Right.
And even if they did believe her, then you've also got he might lose his job over this, and then is he going to retaliate against it? Like, everything's wrapped up in that. So there really wasn't a safe way to report it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, which is really sad. And leading up to her death, she was being very careful, very thoughtful, very deliberate with her actions. She knew you have to approach things in a very careful way. I mean, she's walking on eggshells is what she's doing. On September 2nd, 2010, Michelle, Jeremy, and some others, including her brothers, had plans to go to a Paramore concert. And Michelle was a huge fan of Paramore. She'd been looking forward to the show for a long time. One of her sisters was going to watch her daughter that night. And then Michelle had gone to that sister's house that day to have lunch and hang out. I assume also to drop Alexis off. While she was there, though, Michelle tells her sister that she's going to break up with Jeremy that night, that she's telling him. And her sister said, don't go to the concert. Just don't. Like, while he's gone, maybe get your stuff out, whatever. And she's like, and her sister was like, true Michelle fashion, was like, I paid for those tickets. I'm going to this concert. Like, no, mm-hmm. I'm going. And she was adamant that she was going to have a good time. But after the show, she was going to break up with him. So they go to the concert that night. Sean, one of her brothers, was there with her. He said he remembered Jeremy was just in a foul mood. He was pissy. And there's a picture of Jeremy sitting at the concert like...
Yeah, very like, I'm not having fun.
Yeah. And Sean said eventually he was like, look, dude, if you're not going to have a good time, because I guess Jeremy would have been sitting next to Michelle. He's like, if you're not going to have a good time with my sister, can you scoot down? Like, switch seats with me or whatever? And Michelle and Sean do have a good time. There's pictures of them having a great time. Like, it seemed like she had a really good time at the show. So during the concert, though, Michelle started texting people. One of the people that she texted was her sister who was watching Alexis. And she said, "Promise me one thing. Lexi will always be happy and have a good life. That no matter what, Lexi will always be safe and loved." And her sister was like, "What's going on? I'm scared." After the concert, Michelle texted her that she would be at her house soon. "I'll be there soon," to pick up her daughter. And then Michelle's final text went to her brother Scott and read, "Lexi, never forget." Which
These
is
are so cryptic.
Yes, very cryptic. And she doesn't give any context to it. These are just, that's what she's saying. Now, her sister took these messages as, because she knows she's going to break up with Jeremy. And so she's worried that, because police are obviously going to look at these as, see, she was planning to kill herself. These were kind of goodbye notes. Take care of my daughter. I'm not going to be here anymore. But her sister took these texts as, some shit's going to pop off and I need to say this. Like when I break up with him, that she was sensing danger, that she was going to be in danger. Jeremy did later tell investigators that on the drive home, Michelle did break up with him. She said, "I'm going to have all my stuff out of the house by this weekend." He's like, "What, are we breaking up?" And she's like, "Yeah." He said they argue back and forth. It gets heated. They raise their voices, but then they get home and it was fine. No problems.
How does that happen? It just de-escalates all by itself?
And tell me how it de-escalated and she ends up dead an hour later.
Right. Well, and that's something, of course, we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it. But the fact that that is something that police would, that's a red flag, right? Like, oh, you were in a heated argument, not an hour before she ends up dead, or an hour and some change before she ends up dead. That is motive, right? Not here. Exactly. I don't understand, like, all of the pieces. Confirmation bias is what it is.
All the pieces fall completely into place for this having been, what is the, oh my God. I sounded like a Globadine.
It's funny with Dick and Jane.
So now I know how you, what is the statistic that a woman is, I can't remember the exact number, times more likely to die in the process of leaving a relationship?
I don't know why I feel like it's like 6 or 7 times.
I believe so, yeah. And so if that's the statistic, and he confirms that there was a heated argument leading up to this, and we know that when women are leaving a relationship that they are, we'll say 7 times more likely to be killed, and she ends up dead.
Right.
What a coinky dink that she killed herself.
Exactly.
What a coinky dink. But Jeremy does place a 911 call, and we will listen to it just to let you guys know. There it is. There's some kind of like high-pitched voice. He's very animated. So if you're listening with earbuds, you might turn it down a hair. Don't let yourself get blowed out.
Yes.
911. Hey! Please get someone to my house. It's 4700 Sherlock Place. What's going on? Please, my girlfriend, I think she just shot herself with blood everywhere, please. She what? She shot herself. Please. Okay, please get someone here. Please.
Ma'am, I need you to calm down.
It's sir.
Ma'am, listen to me.
It's sir. Listen, hang on. Let me tell you the truth. I'm Deputy Banks with the St. Charles County Sheriff's Office. I work with y'all. Get someone here now.
Okay, I need you to calm down then. You know how it goes. What's the address?
4700 Sherlock Place.
Okay, what's going on there?
My girlfriend just shot herself with my weapon. Please get someone here now. Please.
Sir, we're doing that while I'm talking to you. Is she still breathing?
No, there's blood coming out of everywhere, please.
Okay, so she's not breathing.
Call dispatch on TAC 2. Get them here now. I
Sir, they are on the phone. I need you to calm down. Calm down for me, okay?
You don't understand.
We're coming as clear as we can.
Please get someone here.
Jeremy.
So the call...
Oh, sorry. Also, did you notice that when he made the call, the dispatcher was like, ma'am,
yes,
please calm down. So he is frantic. He's, somebody get here now. And then she calls him ma'am a couple times and he goes, it's sir. And then he immediately comes down. He's like, my name is Jeremy Banks. I work with y'all. I'm a deputy too. Like, it immediately takes that urgency out of his voice.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not a woman.
What's the meaning of this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. Anyway.
It was interesting. The call came over the air that there were shots fired and a deputy was involved and other deputies rushed to the scene. Deputy Deborah Maynard arrived at the scene and went into the home with the others, and she saw Banks crouched near the bathroom, and then she saw Michelle's body on the floor with blood coming from her mouth. She had died from a gunshot wound. To the left of her body, Banks's workout belt, not workout, he's not working out, his work belt was there with his service weapon leaning against it. And there was a tack light attached to the weapon with the light turned on. Beside Michelle, there was a bullet hole in the carpet and floor, and nearby there were spent shell casings also to her left. Their sergeant ordered Maynard to get Jeremy out of the house, and she detected a strong smell of alcohol on his breath. She says that in addition to the alcohol, that Jeremy was just angry. She said that he didn't seem sad. He didn't seem distraught. He was just like, she even like, like he's so mad.
Yes, he's just like aggressive.
Yes,
very aggressive, and like actually making aggressive noises.
Now, Maynard said that she was pretty sure who the victim was, but she needed to make a positive ID, so she found Michelle's purse. And when she found the purse, she found 2 empty pill bottles in it, and with the pills had Jeremy's name on them. But the pill bottles were empty. But then they found in Michelle's pocket 50 pills, including hydrocodone.
This never comes back.
No.
We never hear about this again. This is, tell me you planted something on her without telling me you planted something on her. Why would... The pill bottles are empty, so he literally, allegedly, my opinion, speculation, takes those pill bottles and is like, I gotta make it look like drugs were a part of this or some so she looks discredited in some way.
Right.
So he takes the pill bottles, empties them out, sticks them in her pocket. Why the would she have 50 pills in her pocket? We never hear from anybody that she's a drug addict.
Well, and there's none in her system.
There's none in her system.
Yeah.
So contrived, and nobody says anything about that. Like, it just doesn't... that feels so very much like, as a police officer, like, what if they found something on her would make it look like she did this to herself, or...
Right.
I don't know. And this never comes back. We never hear
does.
another word about it.
Nope. More and more deputies showed up. Some were off duty. Some went up to Jeremy and asked how he was doing and let him know that they were there for him. How sweet. Over the next 2 hours, Jeremy was with friends and family outside the home. Then he was taken to a squad car and interviewed by Detective Jessica Hines. His sergeant, who was off duty at the time, sat in on the interview as well.
Just like friends hanging out, like in the car, like, hey, let me just sit in on your interview. No big deal.
In this interview, I'm guessing Detective Hines, she's like, what were you drinking tonight? And he's like, oh, Bud Light. And she's like, ew. And he's like, yeah, big ones. And that's part of the interview. It's literally just friends shooting the shit. Like.
Yes, 100%. Also, I'm sorry, I have to go back to the pills because this just popped in my head.
Oh my God.
If the pills were supposed to, if this was supposed to be a suicide, if she was going to try to kill herself with pills, okay. It's not like if you shoot yourself and that doesn't work, then you'll ingest 50 pills.
Right.
I would think you'd ingest the 50 pills, and then if that doesn't work, you shoot yourself.
Right. Yes, 100%.
She has none of it in her system. Like, it just doesn't make any fucking sense.
No, not at all. And it's literally like he just assumes if they don't buy the gunshot wound situation as suicide, it's like, well, I put the pills in her pocket. Like, doesn't that show you?
Look at all the pills. She obviously was intending to kill herself.
Right. And obviously, I mean, I don't want to be a spoiler alert. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he did that because...
Exactly. And she somehow...
hang on now. Yeah.
She missed and hit the floor.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway.
Ugh. Jeremy said that he was in the garage sitting on his motorcycle when he heard a loud pop. Is this,
No.
Shania Twain that don't impress me much?
Yeah.
Like, he's in love with his motorcycle, so he was like tucking it in for bed, just hanging out on it for a little bit, giving it some time, just
like, hey girl, let's hang out here. Like, I'm gonna sit on her for a little bit. I don't know. I don't have a motorcycle.
Maybe you should get one.
And then I would just sit on it in my garage every night before bed and tell it a bedtime story.
Yes. Just tickle it a little bit, have a tickle fight, and then kiss it, and then...
Paint her toenails, whatever.
Yeah. It's just bizarre. But he says that he ran inside, he started screaming Michelle's name. Then he said that he tried to get into the bedroom, but it was locked, and he heard a second pop. Then he ran into the living room, he grabbed the phone, and then he went back and kicked the bedroom door in. He entered, he found her lying on the floor. Immediately, amongst all of the officers and deputies that were on the scene, the talk was that Michelle had died by suicide. Detective Hines later said that she didn't have any suspicion that it was anything other than that, and they were all discussing it to make sure that they had covered all the bases, and she described it as a CYA, cover your ass thing, just in case it was not as it appeared to be.
But why did you think it was a suicide? It's because when he called in, he said, my girlfriend shot herself.
Right.
And so then you proceeded to do 0 things to verify whether or not that's what happened. Just because he said so.
Right. Well, and we're going to find out, which, I mean, of course, we'll talk about it, but it's 100% confirmation bias because they are using all of the evidence. They're trying to fit it in to be a suicide. They are not looking at it objectively at all.
Also, I have a question about where she was found because Detective Maynard, when she gets there, or Deputy Maynard, I forget, was she a detective or a deputy, but...
Deputy, I don't know.
She gets there and says that she walks into the house, she can see through the doorway of the kitchen that Michelle's feet are, like, that's where they are. So then she turns that corner, but it's like an open entryway, like how your kitchen opens into the living room. But I thought she was in the bedroom.
Well, I will say I lived in an apartment that was very much like that, so.
Okay, so maybe it just, okay, because that's, the pictures that you see are kind of tucked in. I don't remember whether or not I saw a bed in the background or whatever, but I just thought that was like, I was like, well, when you walk in, your bedroom's not, I mean, my bedroom is off of our kitchen, but yeah, that one, it just looked weird to me, but okay.
Yeah. I lived in an apartment that had that for sure, and it was very annoying because sometimes you want a door.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, so deputies.
Okay. Oopsies.
We are creating our own freaky twin language, I think, over here. So anyway, deputies were then instructed to go to Michelle's family and make a death notification. They were immediately suspicious of what happened simply because of the love that Michelle had for Alexis. Like she would never leave Alexis alone like that. They all agreed that she would never do that.
Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that a parent would never take their own lives or anything like that, but nothing leading up to this situation
lends itself to she was thinking or contemplating or planning to kill herself. And she also was supposed to start her new position at the daycare the next day. Within 4 hours of Michelle's death, the investigators were already telling the family that she died by suicide. I think that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
One of Michelle's friends said that Michelle was planning her future, not suicide. I mean, we've already talked about that. And Michelle had plans to go see another friend later that night and had texted her, and they had confirmed the plans were still on. So she's got plans that don't include, or, When Michelle's brother Sean heard about her death, he got a ride to the house and was immediately confronted by 4 deputies who told him that he needed to go home immediately. He told them that the family wanted an outside investigation. They did not want the sheriff's office dealing with it because of Jeremy's position. And they were like, we don't give a care. We're doing it anyway, and you need to leave.
They never should have touched that investigation. Never. The moment they got called out to that house and realized whose house it was and what the situation was, they should have immediately called another office in.
100%. Yes.
100%. And him asking for an outside investigation is not an unreasonable request. It's in fact the right thing to do.
Well, and also, I mean, it's like if the evidence, if we're going, because we're going to hear this, the evidence shows, right, that it was a suicide. So if the evidence does show that it's a suicide, it doesn't. But if it does according to them, no matter who takes on this investigation is going to see that, no?
Mm-hmm.
And also...
Yeah, what are you so afraid of somebody else looking at it? Yeah.
I'm getting pissed because if this had been not an investigation involving a police officer, then what do they do? What do we know to be true? They are going to look at it as a homicide and try to, in a lot of cases, try to fit the the evidence to be a homicide, where they're doing the exact opposite here.
Yeah, like it always starts as a homicide investigation so that you collect things in the way that you need to. And then if it turns out to be a suicide, okay. But that way you don't miss anything if it is a homicide.
Absolutely. Yes.
And it takes more than 4 fucking hours.
Yeah. And bag up Jeremy's hands. You know, like, do anything. And you could say what police always say. We're doing this to rule you out.
Uh-huh.
Say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next day, the medical examiner, Dr. Frederick Hoban, performed an autopsy. There was alcohol in her system, which we know she was at the concert, but there were no drugs. She was shot in the mouth, and the bullet severed her spinal cord. There was a cut and a bruise over her right eye, and Hoban said that this was caused by an ejected shell casing from when the gun was fired. The manner of death was recorded as suicide. Now, I am not a medical examiner. I don't even play one on TV.
Oh.
I don't even do that. No.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Don't even. Freaky twin thing, though. But I could see, and maybe it's because, you know, the husband always did it, right? Like that. Maybe that's where it came from at the beginning. But I'm watching, there's a Frontline on this.
I really enjoyed the Frontline. I thought it was very in-depth.
I thought it was very, very succinct. I thought that they got all the information in within, like, there was nothing that was like, oh my God, we're really dragging this out, or...
Right, yeah, yeah. It felt very, yeah, and Walter, I forget how to say his name, Bogdanich? He's the New York Times writer?
Bogdanich or something like that. I don't know how he...
He's a journalist, so he was part of the episode, but he has this very detailed article on this, which was phenomenal. Thank you, Mark, for pointing that out. Like, I read the whole thing. It was really great. There's a lot of really good information in that, but I just thought that that episode was really good.
Yes.
So you should check it out.
Yes. But I'm watching it and I'm seeing the cut, because she had a cut on her lip as well, but she also had the cut over her right eye. And it's bruised. And I was like, there's no... In what world was a spent shell casing gonna do that? And strong enough to do it. But that's not the only... They have more explanations for this.
Okay, you guys, when I know we don't do the window open scale that much anymore. When we get to the other medical examiner's explanation of this, you are going to throw your own self out the window.
Mm-hmm. And then you're going to pick yourself back up and you're going to throw yourself back out it again.
You're going to do it again. I mean, it's...
Uh-huh. Yep. You ain't ready. You ain't. 12 days after Michelle's death, Banks talked again with Detective Hines in the sheriff's office, and he described their relationship as rocky. And this is too... Okay, so when he goes back to have a second interview,
mm-hmm.
She takes what she calls the suspect chair. She's like, let's get the suspect chair out of here. You get the really cozy swivel chair. So obviously, out the gate, there is absolutely no intention of treating him or even looking at him as a possible suspect.
Right. Yeah, it's everything to make him super comfortable. They're shooting the shit again about how echoey the room is.
Yes. It's just outrageous. They did not even a little bit look at it objectively and let's have somebody look at it from this angle. Let's have somebody look at it from this angle. I just don't understand. Mm-hmm. I do understand it. I know what they're doing, but it's just so frustrating.
And these are people that are friends.
Mm-hmm.
Why is she interviewing him at all?
No idea. But Jeremy said towards the end they were constantly arguing over stupid petty shit. Hines asked him if Michelle had ever mentioned suicide before, and Jeremy told her that one time when they were fighting, which is about a month and a half ago, maybe 6 weeks, we don't know, before she died, they had gotten into a big fight, and he told her to pack her shit and get out. He claimed that while she was doing this, they were still arguing, and she rushed him, trying to hit him, so he, quote, put her on the ground. And she said that, quote, sometimes you make me want to kill myself. Jeremy continued and said that since that time, she hadn't said anything like that, and she later admitted to saying it just to bother him.
Also, if his story is... Okay, I know that there are people who, when their significant other is getting ready to break up with them, they will say stuff like, if you leave me, I'll kill myself, and, you know,
right.
Everybody's
if you leave me, I'll die.
Yeah. That's not what happened, though. So he's kind of making it that way, except that she's the one that said, I'm leaving you. I don't want to be in this anymore. Why would she say, I'm going to get my stuff. I'm going to move out. I'm packing up. This is over. And then walk into the bedroom and shoot herself.
There's no reason for it.
It's not like she was trying to get him to stay with her.
Right.
She wanted to get away from him. Like, it just, none of it makes any sense.
No, none of it does. But, okay. After Michelle's death, the sheriff's office never talked to her family about how she was within, like, the weeks or days leading up to her death. They never asked if any of them had seen anything that would have caused alarm or if they had talked to her that night. They didn't ask anything. Several weeks after her death, a detective finally sat with the family, and he said that he hoped it would provide them with closure and that all indications they had was that she was contemplating suicide based on text messages.
Mm-hmm. And that's when her sister was like, no, that's not what those text messages meant.
Right.
I took those as she knew that something was going to happen.
Right. And guess what? It fucking did.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because that's the, like, yeah. It's like, you can say all day long that you could say, well, I thought this, or this was my perspective, or blah, 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 whatever.
But what
at the end of the day, what happened? It fits with homicide. I just don't.
I know.
And they're like, but what if it wasn't, though?
Okay, but it was.
But it was,
yes.
and it fits with it, yeah.
So the family, obviously, they disagreed and talked about different instances when Michelle had told them about Jeremy choking, hitting, and sexually abusing her. And her sister said that the night Michelle died, the sister asked to submit a statement to the detectives about everything that Michelle had told her, but she was told that was all hearsay and they weren't going to do it. Mm-hmm. Scott, the one who was a deputy himself, chimed in and said that the family felt like if it was the sheriff's daughter, everything would have gone much differently. And if he wasn't prepared to answer the questions, he should just leave and bring the next person in. So the lieutenant says, quote, "Ease up, bro. I'm doing the very best I can to show y'all what happened." Then he goes on to say that he didn't do anything wrong and that the sheriff's office didn't either, but he feels like the family has a massive conspiracy theory going on, and there's not one. And when questioned about what the conspiracy theory was, he said, quote, that Jeremy is the murderer of Michelle. In the sheriff's office eyes, the case was closed and they just wanted to give the family closure.
He was very defensive. He's like, I feel like y'all are coming at me. I feel like, and they're like, we're not coming at you, but we're saying like, there's questions here.
Yeah.
And we don't feel like they've been answered. And he basically was like, you're making something out of nothing. There's nothing there.
Well, and, I mean, he's treating them like they're those really obnoxious, because this is the time of year, gnats that just get all up in your face. And he's like, oh my God, like, leave me alone. I'm doing the best that I can here. I'm going above and beyond to give y'all closure. So.
Yeah. Like, you sitting down and being like, I mean, what? That doesn't give me closure. Like, no. Okay. No. So over time, Michelle's family kept pressuring the sheriff's office for more of an investigation, and after 4 months, Sheriff Shore asked for a new investigation to be done by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the FDLE, citing the family's questions and his own questions about the case. So
this is the part where your heart gets happy and you think, oh my God, something that's unheard of, but they're gonna make it right.
They're gonna make it right. FDLE is usually called in when a conflict of interest arises in investigations. This one did not arise. It became a conflict of interest immediately, but whatever. At the time, Patty still worked at the sheriff's office, and she remembered Shore walking into a meeting and saying, well, they're not going to find anything. So, okay, fine. And if they don't, fine. Right? We just want to know.
It's that, like, let's rule it out. Let's, if what you're saying is 100% true and there is nothing to dispute it, then let everybody investigate, because they're going to see the same thing.
Exactly. They would not find the evidence that you're saying is not there. Okay, fine. Yeah. We just want to know that.
Right.
Yeah. Because there are a lot of things the sheriff's office did not do, which we'll get to. But FDLE appointed Agent Rusty Rogers to investigate everything. He talked with members of the sheriff's department, including Michelle's brother, Scott. Scott said, he and the family felt like this investigation was rushed. They'd already made up their mind from the start that it was a suicide. They never took into account that it could have been anything else, right? Scott continued saying that Banks knew that Michelle was going to report his abuse and that it would all come out that he wasn't the person that he was portraying himself to be. And pretty much each deputy agreed with the sheriff's office that it was a suicide. Some, though, disagreed, and this came out when Agent Rogers was interviewing them. One of them said, yeah, I don't think that it happened the way that Jeremy Banks said it did. He said with that gunshot in the floor and where the gun was sitting, like when they found her, did not add up, you know? And he's like, I was in the homicide unit for a few years. It just does not add up in my mind. Another deputy said that it was strange because Banks said they were arguing, and then Michelle pulled the gun from the holster and then shot herself. The problem here is, and this is the same thing that happened with Jessica Boynton. He says that she pulled his service weapon and used that when he wasn't at home. But anyway, this sheriff's department for sure uses retention holsters, and most people could not get a gun out of it even if you tried. There are different types of retention holsters, but they're basically designed to have that like extra level of protection. So that way, if an officer is struggling with an assailant, they can't just reach and grab their gun out, right? Like there are protocols in place. It's kind of like a child lock on medicine, you know, like you've got to know the steps to get this gun out. Mm-hmm. And most people don't have that knowledge. Right. Like you wouldn't know how to use it unless...
Well, they wouldn't have made it that way if everybody knew how to use
it. Was super, exactly. And then this deputy went on to say that Banks has an explosive temper, especially when he drank. And remember, Deputy Maynard could smell the alcohol on his breath. He said, yeah, he'll get pissed. He'll throw shit around. Like, he gets violent when he's drinking, right? Mm-hmm. So FDLE contacted Jerry Finley, a crime scene expert, to go over the evidence in Michelle's case to see if he could find a manner of death. He went over all the evidence, including the evidence that was collected, but never sent in for analysis after it was ruled a suicide.
I'm shocked that they even collected it.
Honestly, yeah. So there was no blood found on the weapon, and Jerry Finley says that's very unusual for the type of injuries that she had. Because if the gun is straight up in her mouth, he said, I would expect at least some blood to be on that weapon.
Well, and possibly like with the recoil, like a tooth being hit or something.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But there was nothing like that. He was also really confused because this is Jeremy Banks' service weapon that he uses and handles all the time for work. His DNA is nowhere on this gun at all. Only Michelle's DNA was found on it.
Yeah.
Where the shell casings were in the photos indicated that the shooter fired the gun with a left hand, but Michelle is right-handed. But guess who is left-handed? Jeremy Banks.
Me too, and I don't agree with letting him into the left-hand club.
Yeah, he's kicked out for sure. Finley went on to say that he believed the injury above Michelle's eye was caused by the sight of the weapon and not an ejected shell casing, as Dr. Hoban, the medical examiner, had stated. He said that based on the evidence he's seen, everything is more consistent with homicide than with suicide. He can't say for sure, right? But he says this is leaning towards homicide. It's not consistent with a suicide. Mm-hmm. As FDLE continued to investigate, they found more evidence. I'm so angry. 2 women who lived nearby were out in their garage having a cigarette when they heard arguing. And they said it was really loud. And it was loud enough that they walked out of the garage to see like where it was coming from and what was going on. They are able to identify that it's coming from the direction of Jeremy Banks's house. Then they heard a woman scream, help. And this, the woman that lived in the neighborhood said it was clear as day the word help. Then they hear a gunshot, then another yell for help, and then another gunshot. Then it goes silent. And then minutes later, there were lights and there were sirens. And she said they didn't call the police or 911 because the police had shown up so quickly. And, you know, they said, we didn't know what happened. Was it an accident? Had something like, we didn't know what it was. The FDLE reached out to the Secret Service to give these women lie detector tests, which they both passed with no deception indicated. Agent Rusty Rogers then presented all of this evidence to Dr. Hoban, that original medical examiner, and Hoban then said, actually, I'm going to amend this death certificate and I'm going to put down the manner of death as homicide. FDLE handed everything over to the prosecutor's office. who then asked the O'Connells permission to investigate further and that they would possibly have to exhume Michelle's body. And they said, yes, whatever you need to do, go ahead and do that. They wait. Nothing happens. They never hear from the prosecutor's office again. Dr. Hoban said that after FDLE had turned everything over, the prosecutor had spoken to him directly and asked him to hold off on filing that amended death certificate report because the case was about to, quote, take a new direction. So don't submit your finding of homicide. Just wait, because we've got something going on, which he does do, which he shouldn't have done. And then the prosecutor is like, actually, guys, I'm going to recuse myself because I've got a close relationship with the sheriff's office.
Did he just learn that information?
Apparently. Apparently, he did not realize that. So then Governor Rick Scott appointed a special prosecutor, even citing the potential prosecution of Banks. Brad King was the man appointed. He's not my favorite.
No.
Just going to say that. He used the opinions of 3 different medical examiners in his personal investigating, all of which concluded it was a suicide. One of the MEs was Dr. Hoban, who had already changed his mind at that point, right? King also spoke with a new medical examiner, Dr. Predrag Bulich. I don't know how to say his first name. I honestly don't care.
We're just going to say Bulich, though.
Yeah, he had taken over the case from Dr. Hoban. So Bulich says the cut above Michelle's eye, y'all, I mean, get ready. He said that's because the gun was upside down in her mouth. She decided to put it upside down in her mouth. And so that light, the tactical light that was at the...
It was at the bottom of the gun, so it would have been at the top whenever...
Yeah, once you turn it over. Because of the recoil of the gun when she pulled the trigger, it would have pushed it forward and caused that cut. Now, let me tell you something. He does an interview for the Frontline episode with Walter Bogdanovich, or I can't. And he has the gun. I don't. I have this. I have a Nerf gun, and I taped this. But let me show you what he does. He says, you ready? He says she turns it upside down.
You didn't tape it correctly, so that's right.
Okay, I didn't tape it correctly. I'm so sorry. So so this is regular. So she turns it upside down. My bad. He puts this part in his mouth like it would be, and he goes like this. Do you see where that's hitting me?
On your cheekbone, for those who are not watching.
That's exactly where it was hitting her, or him, in the interview, on his cheekbone. And he says she pulls the trigger, it recoils forward. We'll get to that in a second. Like that. He pushes it into his fucking cheekbone. So that caused a cut on your eyelid? It cut, how
don't know.
Fuck you say?
Right.
So the other problem with that is recoil doesn't make it move forward, you guys. It makes it move back. Like, I've gone shooting with my husband. I've used a 30-30 rifle, and you are holding that thing, and you've got the butt pressed up against your shoulder, and you pull the trigger, and it back
Kicks
into
you
your
back.
shoulder.
Yeah, they call it kickback.
Kickback.
It's if not recoil, it's kickback.
They don't call it kick forward.
Right.
And he says the recoil caused it to move forward. That simply does not happen. Anyway.
But go ahead. I want to know how he supports this information or this theory.
So he creates a report. Air
Quote,
quotes
unquote,
report.
Yeah.
He takes a picture of Michelle's face laying there, like from, it's not an autopsy picture, I think it's from the crime scene. It's a crime scene photo. He takes a picture of her from that shows the cut above her eye. He takes a picture of the gun, cuts it out, tapes it to the picture of her face, and lines it up where he thinks about like how it might work.
See? I feel like that's he might as well have just drawn out like stick figures and been like,
yes,
do you see?
That's the level. You can see the tape, like he's physically, it's just taped on there. You can, like, to me, that's the same level as like my second grader doing a project at school where he would tape some shit to a cardboard, you know, like to a project board. That's all he had to support this, you guys.
This isn't the science fair. Like,
no.
This is...
No. And then when he tries to get that gun out of the holster, because Walt Bogdanich is sitting there with him and says, here's the gun. I want you to show me how this would have happened. He can't get the fucking thing out of the holster.
But get this, though. So Walt is like, well, if you can't get it out, wouldn't it reason to say that, you know, maybe she would have had a hard time getting it out as well? And he's like, well, I mean, if you gave me more time, I could have gotten it out.
Yeah. He said even a child could figure this out if you give them enough time. I don't know about that.
I don't either. I know for a fact I would have needed to phone a friend. Like, there would be no way that I would have been able to figure that out.
And if you're going to form an opinion on this case, wouldn't it be important to know that she got it out of a retention holster and you should have that information? Like, you need that information to make your decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if you can't even get it out, because I'm guessing if she's fumbling with it, I guess based on what Jeremy is saying, he was in the garage tucking his motorcycle into bed. Right. But if she had all that time to be fumbling with it, she could have gotten caught. You know what I mean? Like, it just, the thing is, it doesn't make sense. And do you know why? Because it's not fucking true. That's why.
Exactly.
There's no way in hell that there are this many coincidences.
Yeah. And why do you have to, it's like you're making all these excuses, explaining so many things away. Mm-hmm. Like, why do you have to keep doing that?
Well, and we're going so far as to make a goddamn collage as evidence.
Exactly. Like, oh my gosh. So just the whole thing is freaking insane. And further review of the document that Bulich submitted was described as amateurish at best by experts in the field. The scales were off. He didn't even put it to actual scale. He just like took one picture here, one picture there, and just was like, there you go. And it couldn't have been to scale. Yeah, because if he had put it to scale, it would have hit her in the cheekbone, not the eye.
I love that you have a prop. It's just so good. We need to do this for every case.
I know. When I was like reading about this and like watching stuff, I was like, where the is that Nerf gun? I know I have one. Like, of course,
it's perfect.
Taped it on the wrong spot, but you know.
No, but it's perfect.
Yeah, there was just no way this matches up. Mm-hmm. After 3 months of investigation, Brad King called in the O'Connell family to go over his findings, and they were like, this is it, right? There's more information here. We know that. Her death is going to be vindicated. He's going to be prosecuted. And he said, actually, no. There's just not enough evidence to believe that even a crime was committed at all. And Scott O'Connell had an outburst, the one who works for the sheriff's department at this point, and he said, this is fucking ridiculous. He was like, you know, to Brad King, how would you feel if this was your daughter? How would you feel if something like this happened to your daughter? And nobody was doing their job, right? Mm-hmm. And Brad King declared Michelle's case as closed. And he said, quote, when you talk about this case, yes, there's a visceral sense of like, oh, what if she was murdered and this guy gets free? But there ought to be some visceral sense of what if she did commit suicide and he's in prison for the rest of his life? And that's a direct quote. That's what he said. We say died by suicide, but
right.
Okay, fine. Sure. But again, your evidence is going to show one way or the other. And Walt was like, isn't that what a jury is for, though? To weigh the evidence, and they're the finders of fact. And He's like, yeah, but you got to have some stuff to get to that point. You can't just, bitch, you got some stuff.
Yeah. And obviously you can, because you did not have any evidence to point to a suicide, but somehow you still got here. So
exactly.
The O'Connell family never heard anything further about exhuming Michelle's body, so they took matters into their own hands. They contacted Dr. William Anderson, a forensic pathologist, and he was asked to go over Michelle's first autopsy and then perform a second. While going after the first autopsy, he saw an x-ray that caught his eye. Michelle's jaw had indications that her jaw was fractured, and when they did the second autopsy, they confirmed this.
Excuse me? Mm-hmm. That was not on the first autopsy report at all. No mention of a fractured jaw.
No, not at all. And once this news is out, Sheriff Shore released a statement regarding the exhumation of Michelle's body, in part, it reads, quote, "On January 12, 2016, media reports circulated that the body of Michelle O'Connell was removed from her place of rest by certain members of her family. At the time, no one was certain exactly why this was done, but the speculation was that a paid expert witness would be hired by these family members to produce a report that, of course, would support their belief about the case. Today, we learned that this speculation was accurate. Molesting Michelle from her place of rest using some freelance type approach is beyond unconventional. It was reprehensible."
You gotta be fucking kidding me.
Mm-hmm.
Shore brought his audacity with him.
Yes, he sure did.
He went to Costco and got a bulk order of audacity.
Yes.
What? You're calling her family reprehensible for trying to get answers in an investigation that you did nothing for?
Well, and the way that he's like, "Oh, you guys disturbed her place of rest?
How could you?"
Yeah. This is not your fight, Sheriff Shore.
No. And he's making a big deal about this paid expert witness, but what did we find out about Anderson? He did the whole thing pro bono. He didn't charge them a dime.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like, he's just trying to take money from this family. One of Sheriff Shore's, like, if he had a dating profile, it would be like, maybe I like long walks on the beach and making absolutely unfounded claims against other people that I can't back up, that I made up out of my own fucking head.
And there is so much wrong with that, with anybody in a case like this, but the sheriff, that is a very, very precarious and irresponsible way to handle this, because people are going to take what you say without evidence or merit as fact. People are going to take it that way.
Absolutely.
So you got to be careful.
Yeah, you should be held to a higher standard. If you want a position of high responsibility, you have to have a higher standard.
Yes, absolutely. Ooh. Dr. Anderson says that the only reasonable conclusion he can make is that there was another force, a blow to the chin, that broke Michelle's jaw before she was shot. And he goes on to explain that he doesn't believe the gunshot caused the fracture, saying that the shot put a hole in Michelle's tongue, but it did no other damage to her teeth, gums, or the floor of her mouth, like we talked about earlier. The soft tissue of her mouth would have been destroyed from the force of the blast if it was strong enough to break her jaw. Others say that if she were hit, there would be bruising or something, and Anderson says that he's found in the over 1,000 autopsies that he's performed that if you die quickly enough after a blow, it will not bruise.
Yeah, there's no activity from your body to make the bruise. Like,
absolutely, yeah. Another thing that sticks out to Michelle's family is the location of the shell casings. At the scene, the casings were found to the left of Michelle's body, and testing performed while firing the gun upside down, as the investigators say happened, showed that all the casings went to Michelle's right.
It also cut the shit out of the guy's hand.
Oh, big time,
because of the recoil,
because
going
of the
backwards.
Recoil.
It did not cut forward, it cut backwards.
Yeah.
Come on.
Michelle doesn't have a wound
Nothing.
to the back of her hand. No.
Nothing.
Or to her hand. In 2017, the Florida ME's commission reprimanded Hoban and Bulich because of the handling of Michelle's case. Hoban because he brought material home and hadn't kept it in the ME's office, including Michelle's amended death certificate, and Hoban was also called out for his poor record keeping and failing to document the jawbone fracture. They cited Bulich for showing autopsy photos to non-family members, which he wasn't supposed to show, and also doing a piss-poor job at collaging.
Yeah, come on.
In 2013, Jeremy Banks filed a civil lawsuit against the FDLE agent Rusty Rogers, claiming he violated his civil rights. In the suit, they claimed that Rogers, quote, purposefully withheld vital exculpatory information and advanced false information to the court, including a county judge when pursuing a search warrant, the SJSO, witnesses, and others associated with the case in an effort to have Jeremy Banks charged with murder. As a result, Rogers would be suspended pending an investigation. A judge found that Rogers had probable cause to detain Jeremy Banks for homicide and dismissed the lawsuit in 2018.
Yeah, and during that time, Rogers wasn't able to go to work. He was not allowed to tell his side of the story. He was going through cancer treatment. His mom died, and he lost a ton of money in lawsuit stuff, and now he's been totally cleared of any wrongdoing. Like,
and
go ahead.
You go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, Jeremy Banks got away with literal murder. So why he needed to file a lawsuit on top of that is beyond me, because it's like, dude, you got away with it. So let it go.
Yeah. And also, you know, those 2 witnesses that heard the fight and the gunshot and all that, Shore tried to discredit them by saying that they were heavy marijuana smokers and were high as a fucking kite that night and didn't even know what was going on.
Well, he went as far as to say that the women couldn't recall if they had smoked that night either.
Yeah, they didn't even know if
so
they had
out of
smoked.
their fucking gourds.
And they both were like, that's simply not true. Like, none of that's true. And we know he makes shit up. But what I thought was so funny about that, I Googled, is Shore still the sheriff today? And, you know, he ended his reign in 2021. But he fairly recently, in the last couple of years, got arrested at a traffic stop. Like, they made a traffic stop. He did something, maybe didn't use his blinker. I don't remember what. There was weed all over his car. All over his car. He had marijuana every fucking where. Per this article I read from their newspaper. But
that's why he lied. I'm sure, because he was so high on the marijuana. Cigarettes.
They're high on ecstasy. Yep.
Yes.
Anyway, there's so much more to this case, you guys. I could honestly talk about it for 8 hours, but we've hit our time limit here. So let us know what you think.
Yes.
And
we will catch you on the next episode. We love you.
Bye.
Bye.